Good morning, Geshe Tapke.
감사. 뭐야?
말에 단다 간든 등규래. No.
Good morning again, Rinpoche. Thank you for teaching us this morning. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for your translations. Welcome to people online joining us this morning. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers that you'll find a link for in the chat box.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneless gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who I stand, I bow, with pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow, with the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flower-strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offer to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Gurana Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
다 딕송겐라.
Oh yeah. 내 다 갔어. 뭐 되게. 강시 수시 송바에 캔다 덤발라나메. Gawa Tension Rever and Joe 6 Tomba Telande. Oh, that got order. Simje Tamjeg Tundo. Ya Simje Tamjeg turned troop Tungenge. Sanje Koban Tobe Chedo. And it should in Yangi some cool set of the Sangura. Somebody shoes. Oh, yeah. Tiene got order. Malmaless. Oh, Tiene Kulu cars not to set them. Simje Tamjeg turned troop Tungenge. Sanje Koban Toba Chene. Teach you to Chunyangi some. Oh, Tinder Kulu some Lutanatake. The pen shabu order. And I ran to this should have pens I some such a good. Not to Chunju Nalasungua. Pember Samba Samji Jangse. Shalia Pember Samba Samji Jangse. Simjangi turned troop to Genki. Pendoch Pember troop to Genki. Sanje Kovan Tobas. Show some sake. Pensim some giver in our Sungua. Pember Samba Samji Jans. Sanje Chule Kepanas. And this Sanje Shingam Bumdra Sayamang Bolera. Shingam Jidan Kampa Sayamang Bolia. And the Rambuchin Natinula so what in Regi. Sanje Le Chuba Puale. Tisunam Chewa in Sungua. The thing is a Kevin Dole somewhere else or Sanje Chule Kepanas. And I rather the Chachumbi the Shibuchana, the pension Shibuchida Yorwami. Teleja, Simjag Tamjel Panton Gaki Michin Jurasho, Samsa. Tinde Jankun say in their consulting Jurasho, Samsa Samlatana, Pepe Chambure de Ora. Simjin Yingdu Peggy Pelige Ora. Oh, the Sanje Chule Kepanas. Simjam Malu Tamje Kesera. Simje Tama Tamjege. The troop to Gagasura, Simjam Malu Tamjegi. Teche Donge Sanje Koba Tobar Chagi, some Simchuma Maimbake. Teche do Anichi Batsutum Sabala Soba Lalinga Sutargetela. Pay Patu Meba Yoba, the Mercy could the Merco Maresura. Pembar Samba Samji Jans. Sanje Chile Kepana, Kebat Pares. Simjam Malu Tamjegis. There's a day to the nurse of Batella, Penny Chamberton and Rejo, Mexico, Songodoa. Oh, yeah, teacher Lona.
So, to begin with, to he who saw and taught dependent origination, I bow to that teacher who explains that seeing, what he has understood to others. So here we need to give rise first to the proper kind of motivation for listening to the teachings. Really, we should be setting a motivation thinking this is for the sake of all sentient beings. May I myself be able to become a being who is able to benefit all sentient beings. So really giving rise to that intention, that kind of motivation is something that is incredibly powerful. As Shantideva has said in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, that even just to the wish to benefit other sentient beings is superior to making like grand offerings to many Buddha fields. So here, even if we were to imagine like realms, all kinds of realms filled with the 7 precious items, filled with jewels and so forth, making that kind of extensive offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is surpassed by this intention to be of benefit to others. This is also described in a verse from the King of Concentration Sutra, where it says that making great offerings to the Buddha, this kind of extensive offerings of realms filled with jewels and so forth, is surpassed by the kind of thought of wishing to be of benefit to others. So here, when we give rise to that kind of attitude, wherein we wish, even if it's just a wish, to be able to become the kind of being who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, that alone increases our kind of strength of mind, our conviction. And when we have this thought that for all beings without exception, may I be able to become of benefit to them, may I be of help to them, to think of that in a kind of unfabricated, contrived sort of way, that is something that what need do we what need is there to speak of the benefits if a wish to benefit other sentient beings itself surpasses such an extensive grand offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? A being who genuinely wishes to benefit others all without exception and thereby engages in the six perfections, generosity and ethics and so forth, pursuing that goal, what need is there to speak of the kind of benefit that comes from such activity? So here, reflecting on the fact that such an intention, such an attitude is far superior to even extensive offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we should take care to set a proper kind of intention for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah, Drisara. Cookmendo. Oh yeah. Oh, do Carsore. Nangarajo Pina. Cascanya Pertova Sayo Mambuja Soa, Mimambushi Soa. A Kanga Molam Dresha. Never to Ya Yoga Tragata. And it's Tunganya get to do. Shisange to the Jawa Sambolaya, the Tender Molam Captain de Sierra. Cascali Chicadoa. And I did the Vala Molam Captain de Sierra. Oh, do Carsore. There's a pengi order. Sona Mambusa order. Oh, do Razo Sayum de Capde Conjoe Neverwa. She has your Mara Koran Swiss Sebeke Marwa. Teaching the direction the Pe. Sama Gatelia. Niche Samsa Tungeda China, some Kange or Samsa Roboche Kangape, Harubaru Chidoa, Kasakane. Tatile Dua Chilagarazo, me Sogodoa. Juma never came Barangarazo Garanzo Soya or the Tile Dua Sierra. Me Bumdra Mambo Segi or the Pu Shunju Pama Strong Sage, Lete or the Tungusum do Tonde Yora. Tingarazo Tanda me Chinga Sir Wako. Sachu Melon Juma could never church and Garazo Serva Maige, Tinde Chuma Maroa. A Tezoya son, Tilia, or Tinde Kabli and Garazo Kanga Karsora. Tia Umaris and Menase. Tunganya gets some jet to Tungeda Trena Samsa. Kulu Samlutan, Pendo Share, the Samlutan Kudoa. Tia Umare Kange Chonsha Chichese. Tezunga to Temate, Dede, but Shiraka Chimaro. Chichi Mama Chigase, say to go to me, Chida Tondra Mambo Sega to Chichese. Sentende Karsora. Kitile Jansen Pambashira. Juaga never show at the chairs your mother. Marazul never your mother. Tende never showed you as a Shidave. Tunga yon saw Yam Yon Shedge, Pessim de Che, Robashidoa. A Timmy Marazo made Che to Serne. Marazo Lava Yobate, teacher Natalia Tanda. Oh, they shall some Zakachi to which on Nakayo mother. Concert Galico Samsa Samlako Gavara. Or Tepe Jobora, some Joboshara. He did in Decabla, some Yavataja Casa, Pensum Chayata. Oh, today, Case Boreto. Yeah, teach Lamna.
So here, therefore, this kind of an attitude is something very important to train in. We recently in Tibet, there was an earthquake. And there was much suffering that was caused by this earthquake. We see all over that there are those making prayers for those who are injured and harmed to be quickly healed, and those who have died to take good rebirths and so forth. Even here at our center, we have been making prayers for that. And this is something where it's maybe easy for us to give rise to compassion because it is a disturbance of the elements. I mean, an earthquake is a natural disaster wherein these kinds of harms and difficulties occur, but it's not as though anyone did it, anyone caused it, but rather it's just the way of things. It is the nature of our world that there are going to be those kinds of natural disasters. But when we think about it, the kinds of harm that are done by humans to other humans are actually much worse than even these kinds of natural disasters. So we have this sense, I mean, it's easy for us to look at that kind of situation of like an earthquake and feel a kind of compassion for other sentient beings and wish that they be freed from their sufferings, that their sufferings be quickly ended. But often when it comes to the kinds of sufferings that humans create for one another, we see that if we really look around the world, there are those doing harm, killing hundreds, thousands, and so forth. And we kind of tend to sit here like we're just watching a movie, like that's happening somewhere else. But really, that should make us feel quite depressed looking at what humans do to one another. So what we have done, what we as humans do to one another, is we shouldn't look at it as, well, whatever happens, happens. But training our minds in a beneficial attitude has a benefit. There is a benefit in trying to eliminate those kinds of thoughts of wanting to harm others and training in compassion and love. And here, it's not just in those cases of natural disasters, but even for those situations where we as humans are the cause. Dixon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, take the car soda. Oh, take the car soda. Oh, chain you do in a cadu in a samba sambucha. Gulu Joya de Pe, Gashamburedo, Tinde. Simja Tamjagatundo. Simja Tamjagatu, Truptum Gengi. Junkus, you de Kunde, Kibushin, you are awesome. The Eche to Gun Sayada. You then to be a shadow. Chunal Carson, you know. Tin Yanjang, Tele Samlutan, Telecom Dichache, Yamlichi in Samsa. Gulu said them the Samba shoes. Oh, teach you up and do that.
So whether we are listening to Dharma or doing any other activity, it's really important that we train our minds in this kind of attitude, develop that wish to become a fully enlightened Buddha, wherein we have the ability to help others. So really the Dharma is about finding ways to train our mind, to develop those kinds of good qualities and eliminate our faults, and thereby habituating our mind to whatever kind of learning, whatever sort of trainings we have learned is really what the essence of the Dharma is. So we should set our motivation thinking, I'm listening to these teachings that I'm going to put into practice, habituate my mind to, in order to be able to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all other sentient beings.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to do the lesson. Okay, sir. That's about quality. They tar to me. Shuni Nanga Yube, Piri Nam Jesuda. Tadelia, Netic, Tinde Kaga Kagache, Juni Seshara. Then they are like Juni Deco, changing Remu, to me Juni Seshara, Tatadelia. Tisigora. Mendawa. The datos or the Tramita Zunalia, Tome Mariba Sanjay, Niban Duchi, Sumbanam City, Sanjelia, Tata Delia, Kaka Junior Social de Segura. Mendawa, Pado Tenicas, Draw Mendawa, Tetato, Yawayeta, Tundrumi, Lama, La Soba, Draw Tetato, Keva Segura. Simjay Kene, Netine, she draw La Soba, Kene, Shive Pato. No. Today, young Joanne. Oh, Tinde, Joachine, she the cute tender Yala Junior, you gonna quite get or that's Gichi. Shannon Rode Yara, oh, Tis Gora. And Joanne, Tagba Ranjo, get Chibabo, Sushi, Rawange, Cordo Chuba, my English. Tangarazo Meda Lada Lama Yela Soba Tezo, Jawa Sangeda, Lonju Chijun, da Tunge Chijun La Soba Tezo Sama Sigora. Oh, Chibabo Jiden, Dambechu Nashana, Jiden Chibabo Shandachi Sune, T. Samlutan and it did Nazuli Jua Mare Sigora. T. Karjan Juaris and oh, T. Soso Tome Mariba, and it 11 draw son, and it in retination and it draw Rimadrawala. Jolang Yoris, Tiakuya Tandal Shevara. Oh, Tabaranjungi, Chebaboshan Sushi, Rawage, Rawayangi, Chebabochi, you take so your Marese. Kwa Korchu, your Maratungi, your Maratawachi, tell your Marese. My angels on the Karesna, Simja Rangi Leda Numamba, and Numamba Le Chidar Kurwe Suse. Simja Rangi Tambo, Tommy Maribachi, Samga Rawa Samlata. Etene Lesa, Otimation, and a draw room and a medal, the Deche Kurgi or Dase. The Soso Les Sangege Wange, Samlatanda, Kosum Yeshuba Sangege Wange, and it to the Yungi or Dase. Penangarazo said Delaya, Soso Samlutanjo, Ya Sambuta Neba, Lunga Yusum Chuba Sangel Tene, Lunga Yusum Les Legachera, Sambi Sambat, Samluta. And it's a Lunga Java Sambuche, the Sambuyo, Nembachen, Nembayo, and the Toyora. Oh, dinner, she lay Sidusa, Shandajil Kujo Mara, Narazu Cedilla Lesa de Door, Java Sambuchi told Samlutana, Sembasigra, Java Nembachi, and the Samlutangi, that is Sembe Lesigora. Tilatan and a connected Sambushaguna, Nembashaguna, Lunga, Namjutanguna, Lesagora. Tilatan and a Debuyan Yagayogora. The Kasha Kasha to send the Lungusum to Tuyora. Oh, Tinde Wang Yongo Resua, Shan Chababosio Maresora. Kodo Chuba Yingese, my Simja Rangi Leda Yumumba. Rangi Shensushi Jarangi Koto Chuba Mainge. Simja Rangi Leda Yumumba Chidara Koro Chu, oh Rangi Le Sangele Tene, any Koa Korgi or Dase to Teje, Debra Joa. Yala Juni Jikone Koako Su Sumbercheba Inosa. Oh, Tendre Yala Juni Jitami Juni Yubatinane, Tendre Yala Juni Sunji Shade, Jidanji Chebabo, Gawa Sangeta, Titu Noet, Karchan Yungoresana, Tijidangi Chebabo, Shandaji, Rawang, Shagayo Martase, the Soso Samlatan Jota, and the Lungagi Cheba, Joangmata said that Tezuki Sangeletene, and the Yungorese. Oh, this year, she do some good. Oh, yeah.
So here then, turning to the text, we are on page 93, beginning in the middle where it says, the drawings in the ring of 12 images surrounding the 5 realms illustrate how the living beings of various types are born, transit to other lives, and after transitioning, take rebirth. So here in the Wheel of Life, this representation, visual representation, there are 12 sort of separate sections around the outside that represent thereby the kind of process of the 12 links of dependent origination, whereby various types of beings, so again, hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and then we can divide into demigods and gods, those 5 or 6 types of beings which are in the inner circle. It is then by way of the 12 links that they take rebirth. And so here it explains that this illustrates how a permanent self-existent creator deity does not make them cycle. So rather, living beings cycle due to their own karma and afflictions. So it isn't as though rebirths, good and bad rebirths, or the kind of amount of possessions that we have or the lack of things that we have, or suffering and happiness, those are not due to a creator, but rather all of this comes from our own ignorance. First, that initial ignorance that then causes us to create various actions and so forth, which in turn leads to the rest of those 12 links. It isn't as though there is some kind of creator deity who has the power to put us in samsara or give us happiness and suffering, create a bad or a good rebirth, but rather it is due to this process of the 12 links of dependent origination, beginning with that initial ignorance that causes an individual to create karmas, good and bad karmas through the various actions of body, speech, and mind. So there are times when we can see that an action that is performed in this life leads to ripening results that we can see in this very life. But often it's the kind of ripening results of actions that we created in our previous life. So it is then, we can see that our karma is really not just the kind of external actions, but also the intention. When we have the kind of thought to say something, when we have the thought to move in a particular way, that too is creating karma, intentional karma, and then the karma that is intended, the actions that follow through that. So whenever we have that kind of creation of karma, it is going to lead to the ripening of a particular result. Again, some are directly experienced in this life, but it is only due to our own karma, our own actions, that we have various experiences. So our good and bad rebirth, the kind of suffering and happiness that we experience in this life, it isn't due to our having been given that, or sort of that being created by some other factor other than our own karma, that we have accumulated in this life as well as previous lives. So it says again, rather, living beings cycle due to their own karma and afflictions, passing through cyclic existence by means of the 12 factors of dependent arising. This negates there being some sort of creator or other being who is giving this to us. It's all our own creation.
Oh yeah, that's how they said it. Oh yeah. 다들 중이대 바제 천재 때에 알아 중이 거네 중이대 천재대 시에도 와 주문되게 대충거를 주문되게 대충거를 시에 와라 다 당보대로 와 점이 당보 되는 곳으로 하네 두 바제 중이 와라 개모 로 커줄라 때문에 비리게서 견고 아마치 때네 커주지 수체 로아체 미마도 저도 되게 시티셔라 당부들려 디페트페 주무테게서 와라 피르세페 주무테게서 도아 링에서 도알라 링아요라 냐와이다 전도 미라세 디링아 도아 링에 코라 께와 펜제게 레 꾸네 로아르체베 레 당부야 깨충게데 마르바데 nga samsa ngai nesu marikbasora ngai nesu chinjillodo rekbatela marikbasikora ngone de marikbasonza daga nesu ngone de marikbase chinjillodo rekbasonza ne marikbasigora inju chinjillodo rekora dinekasa kemo loa kajula te bepiri ki pe remotege doa re ne 코아르 껴와 펜제질에 꾸네 로아르체베 nga rawe loarchebe rawe ngada ngayirjam nga singeje rawa chiyo batsen baro ane ngai se ne ngai ne ngelu ngeloju nge namisera ane ngai was ngai mi ngai nawas ngai was gora jembe ngao nyambe taage Nelo chishi marikbe tome marikba de chubaynos de tome marikba de chungi warese kemo longa kajula tembade ane nechungone de marikba cheko yandrone dogiyara ho tege karsungosna tome marikba wando soane tish tambu de taage nechu marikba taage nechu chinjilo to samlo kora tege kyechene ne gote nechugora koya tsawa de tiresi gora Yeah.
So then we get into an explanation of what each image illustrates or represents. So each of these images is going to represent one of the 12 factors of dependent arising, beginning with the first image of a blind old woman leaning on a walking stick. So I'm just going to read this full passage and then we'll go through it. This illustrates the initial ignorance of not knowing precisely the nature of the self, thinking I, apprehending an independent I and an independent mine. This ignorance acts as a motivating force for the karma that projects a birth as one of the 5 types of beings. So here again, when one takes birth as one of the 5 types of beings, a hell being, a hungry ghost, an animal, a human, or a god, this is due to karma, and that karma is initially motivated by this fundamental ignorance or this initial ignorance, and it is an ignorance of the way that things are, as it says here, an ignorance of not knowing precisely the nature of the self. This ignorance holds the I to be somehow like independent or autonomous, and then holds the mind as well to be somehow independent, this kind of independent mind. And that ignorance in turn, this lack of knowledge, then a lack of knowledge or misknowledge regarding the way that things are, it is mistaken with respect to the nature of the self. And so it is then due to the force of this karma that one the force this ignorance acts as the motivating force. So ignorance in turn is what causes karma, which in turn projects a rebirth as one of the 5 types of beings. And this is illustrated by this kind of blind old woman who is leaning on a walking stick, and that represents the way in which this fundamental ignorance is mistaken with respect to the nature of phenomena, particularly the self.
Oh yeah. Oh teacher. But then I do the Tameba Tombani said the Shagora to do Tommy Mariba the Map Soetandalia. Oh, did Koyata Soetandal. Oh, did it to do Marazu Mili Kajeshedu, Tanya Giwangi Shagba Maimba, Luda Sem Nilra, Luda Semda Shibalia Dramanda Mamboyordo, Soan Dushi Sembanga Kondonga Jetato Mamboyora, Tesula Tene. And it does it to do young guitars pa me but missing a darwa, trashy to do say around pa minta yora. Oh, Tiwang Shaba Mato Koran when it's so Linchi Yomare, Shagora, Nazuk of the treaty to take doa. Then I think Arazu sem Gikul Munzin Tobachegura. Penandi Tome Mariba the Tundru and Jelliorba. Simja Tundru and Jet to Samaliora. Tinde Tezul Gazupa Gasoda. Tanya Jiwangi Shaba, you rang when they chase it and do some look at Koya Yomara. Tanda de Karakogo and Nas, Sobot and similar laws of yours and Nas, Chiglin, which is some locodo and I'm just Lord Haganalia. Nas is later similar laws of yours. That Tommy Tara Mambo Yungura. Luda similar laws of Yobarich, some locodo, Pumbula tension barrage. The Kandarata, losing SMJ, the Logarich lost Yobarich, some locodo around. Lindas coda or tire. Tindachi Omaresora, and the carres the Titu Yonge Yority, Luda similar ten patane. Roa. The Luigi Chawata, Semge Samlutan, the Cosamlutan, the Cogo, less agato condosesha. And it thought the Drugo Degito, Sochegato, Machimba Legato, Roa, Missegato, say Shagura. Oh, Tendeji Pa, Wanki Pa Shagura. You Ramini, your Marisa Tira. Linda Chidoa Tunda. Nas to the Legend Nalia, Sobus Chik, Sosolos, Yavaris Doa, Tendeji Omara. Yonder Casination as a milishedi. Sene Pumbo Naldo Cavado Sene Raumidus Samlutan me sometime in the Yora. O T the Sosa Nanjing and Jessing and I'm just Samlutan to the Deji Kogi D inside Samsung Munziche Togura Nanzide. Then I thought it was actually Lutan Samlutan the Tangachi Pa Lo Tayachidua. Ya Pa Tamagocha Sosa Linglidas so chick Yever Samluchidua. Oh, Tilisayora, Ting and Zungunzi Togura. Tome Maribasido, some little days cook did it to awesome. That you are getting I sing Alachi, Chicago Yongora. Then the Maringa said, Luda Semlapa, then they talk about some Shagorasana. Tagging Emma Linlinja, some loco dead, Degmedua. Oh, Chichi Kesambura. So circular Tome Mariba, D. Samara Carres, Samsa, Tundra Angela Yoga, Consul Samloka de or Samsa, teaching Gunzito Chagora, teacher Lamna.
So here, normally in the context of talking about this initial ignorance, we also discuss emptiness, selflessness. In order to be able to eliminate that kind of initial ignorance, we have to have a realization of the lack of such a self as we normally grasp it to exist. So it seems to us, not just to us as humans, but to all sentient beings, there is in our innate mind a sense that there is some kind of a self that is like really concretely, autonomously, independently there, other than apart from the body and the mind. It doesn't seem to us in our normal course of events that, oh, this self that I feel or this feeling of an I is just something that is merely nominally existent. But rather we have a sense that there seems, I mean, and this is again, not just human beings, but all sentient beings, even animals in their innate mind. It seems as though there's like a solid, concrete kind of an I that's there, something that is somehow apart from the aggregates, that is somehow like solid and concrete and autonomous. And so here, this is something that is very important for us to be able to identify in our own continuum, in our own mind, be able to look at and see, this is how I am grasping the mind. So here, when we think about it, when we sort of have in our innate mind, there's this sense that there's an I that's like there, it's concrete, it's real. But when we begin to investigate and analyze, we can see that the I or the self is something which is merely designated on the body and the mind, the various kinds of minds too. We have all sorts of different minds, anger and jealousy and desire and so forth. It's not as though the self, the I, is either the body or the mind, but when someone does something like, oh, Tashi stole or Tashi lied or something, we can say that that person did that thing because it is a mere dependent designation, independence upon those aggregates and the actions done by those aggregates. We can say, oh, this person did that thing. But to our innate mind, it seems as though there is this like solid, real I. And this is something that it is very important for us to be able to identify, to look at the way in which our innate mind has this sense of an I. And when we come to be able to identify that, and have a sort of understanding of what it is to be merely nominally existent. If we understand the I is merely nominally existent, that negates, that gets rid of that sense of there being a concrete, solid kind of an I.
Oh yeah. Din Sarah. Oh yeah, today Keshabuda, Namji, Chenny Bozula Segura, Changja Reveto, Sonji, one of you as the great Changja Reveto said. Tina Giora. Tindu Rari, Los Angeles, she said, and Arazo Pechatanke Segura, Lodro Savato, Pechatanke Segura. Tindurari Los Angeles. Sutup, Ta said, Ta me said, Sutuba, Rawa, Siorwa, Sutup Tembadrubase. Tezu Sikil ten Hesora, Sutup Tindru, Sutup Tindru, so Talashan, Tasdi Ming de la Sigora, Tela Shane Sigora. Kauju Rajan Soda, Pa Kaya de Rajo Yungeri, Shanda Jitsel de Do Sigora. Tsudu Tembadru around to a Shanda said those ora. Tsudu Tendruso Talashine. Kauju Pa Kasha, Tembadruba se Tas Kayate, Rajo Yung Rago Younger, Sing Shandaji, some Lokogo Sigara. Kauju Rajan Sordos. Unicare. Tite Amaish, Tatombani, Tumone Todus Sigora, Tite Amai Shiretenase. Langla Lin de Yoga Mendoza. Langla Lin of Sam Chico Dongas, the Chi, Soboda Sam de Chick Tosudan Del Megovico, Lin de Nabu Sam Locodes Doa. O Tindrese Tombaningone to Latindrete Yoga Keja Medoda Segura. Tunda, Soso Nabu Sam Luna Yodage, Nas Lingi or of Chi Sam Locodoa, Lin de Soto Cora loss, Kivesor, Rawan, Vessel, some could. What is Yawoche, Soso Nambuti, Nanzinti, Munzinchene, this some town, Nanzinti Ranja Shashenda, Tembadruba, 라와도 들어가서도 라고 연결을 신다 그 세요 말했어도 어디에 계신분도 야
So, again, this is something that is really important, as the great master Changyal Rinpoche Dorje has described in his poem, Recognizing the Mother, talking about emptiness. It is the case that sometimes those who think of themselves as scholarly or as very erudite have this idea that they sort of leave alone. Although they are kind of attached to or cling to these notions of things as being truly existent or existent from their own side, rather than identifying that in terms of the way it appears to our innate mind, they're searching for some kind of true existence that is like something with horns, that is something out over there. So it really here, what he is saying is that rather than identifying the way in which this I appears as something like solid and concrete, something that is existent from its own side in the way that it appears to our innate kind of mind, this type of sort of faulty practitioner leaves that aside and goes searching out for something else that they think of as being true existence, that is like something sort of monstrous with horns or something. So it's very important that when we as practitioners are looking for this kind of innate sense of an I, that we don't disregard that sort of solid, concrete sense of an I and go searching out for something else that we think is true existence, but rather we need to be connecting with our own innate way of seeing things, not sort of searching for some other referent of this term.
Oh yeah. This one. Bah. 어디 인도에 야보 삼로 땅고에 계신분도 배나 가지고 단다 나라저 로렌지 날이야 가지고 삼로 거기도 나라 야보를 지정이나 가지고 딘데컵을 또서 난진데 세부 용거라 야보를 시베촌에 가다라시나 당아야 보죠 야 신하로 지중제 지버를 지중네시 신하로 시베촌 나삼사 삼로 거기도 남주네도 삼로 단다다 가서도 samlo kora na shingi ngachi yona ti ngati yona tindachi yona ane ti luda ken delgo medoa semda ken delgo medoa kora logaje doa pera ondo dovare rede doa o ti inde ko tindati lala lingling se ngaji namje samlo ko denge tina ne machi 동반이 다음에 봤을 때네 알랭에 남주 섬로 텐데스 거기 요사 말에 아삼사 나세 텐데스 요 말에 이나가라 통마만 공배와게 대섬로 코데요레 삼사지 문지지 토고도 게만에 소소 나가 삼사 섬로 땅에 들은 저와치 매버치네 나지다 담베셰다네 게스 캔도 시라요 말아 어디 인데코 소소 섬로 땅 나지세 컨데스도 디스만틀 문제 토고에 때 계셔보라. 디나네 땅하에 세대 때네 따고삼. 풍부할 때네 봐따 봐참. 르르기 차셰 가야 말에 샘지 차셰 가 시베 차셰 가야 말에 디니르 때네 때다가 자와치는데 다가 자와치기도 냠바치기도 대화용고 동안용고 세지. 샤고 그래 텐데시 마토지게. 이 고랑은에 라완도 전에게 메도아 풍부갈 땐 단예기 왕기 바직 샤네 에네 가도 대기 대화용고 동안용고 스트레 샤고 있도아 어떤데 소소소 삼르도 스타트네 아보요라 진득바체 도매 마릭바데 계신부르 텔레테네 강가 용거라 에네 가예스 라와치체 에네 가조스체 에네 셴체 다초 셴조체 에네 차다 로와 카셰링고 카셰베 라바도 셈슈드웨 카셰 텔레메팀발레바 타와치에 착바데 기도 대체라 나 삼사랑 나데는 나의 삼사가 삼사 착바데 기와라 착바 유지 여사도사 telako koyeda chaba shanda mambuchida teda neba sengeda metimbola kondrosa yongdo chagda ge wage ne lesa tudeta koajeje le mado saya yomara chagbe wage kevele sana koakure chagba da tawe wage mikevele sana kwa kogiora, kwa kochile redugora. Yeah, what is it? Then it
So, thinking about this is something that is extremely important to be able to identify that sense of an I in our innate mind is something that really is crucial for us to do to really have this practice be effective. So, for example, when something good happens to us, we can more easily identify this kind of sense of I. Like we have this thought of like, oh, something good happened to me. Or when we are really afraid, when we have some sort of experience of fear or trepidation, there's also a sense of I that comes up, this like wanting to protect this I. And so in those kinds of moments, we need to investigate if there were an I, such as it appeared to me, it wouldn't be like possible. I mean, in those cases of where we are identifying with a particular state of mind, then the I wouldn't be connected with the body at all. And so we have to identify this within our own innate kind of thinking, our normal way of thinking, and come to recognize that that is erroneous, that we are mistaken with respect to the way in which we perceive this I to exist. But instead, if we unconnected with our actual experience or what is happening within our innate mind, we go searching for some sort of philosophical concept or thing that is this I to try to negate, that's not going to be of any benefit. So here, when we are looking at our body and mind, which are the basis upon which this I is designated, we can't find the I to be any part of the body or the mind. But yet when we do actions or we have various thoughts, we can say, oh, I think this, or I am doing that, because that I is a mere designation on that basis, designated by thought and convention. And so if we are able to really contemplate on this and actually identify that innate grasping, or we have various thoughts, we can say, sorry, some feedback there. So here, this is something that is, again, when we are able to contemplate the way in which our initial ignorance then misperceiving this I, we then have a kind of attachment to the I and the mind. And this in turn then gives rise to attachment and aversion. We have a kind of attachment to our side. We want to protect that. We want to keep it from being harmed or damaged in any kind of way. And we have an animosity toward that that is considered to be other. We give rise to anger and hatred and so forth. And from that, we then engage in various actions and various karmas, which in turn can lead to nothing but rebirth within samsara. So it is through this initial ignorance that all of the rest of these links come to be. And by really identifying the way in which our innate mind grasps that I, this is critical for being able to dismantle that kind of initial ignorance. In samsara. So it is through
Oh, yeah.
initial ignorance that all
That is that and the Koya Zawasan and the Diabushing Wensingua. Chama Yosadi Tira, Tambungashi Dala Shinju, and the Dagin de Sierra, Chabahira, Dagin, and it Quacogiora. Das and the Dak Cho Shensho, Nazu Lumba Serra, Nazu Chulu Serra, Ganga Yungora. Oh, the Takeshimura, Tome Maruba, Koya Zawa. Oh, the Abuching Shitrangunzi Matuna, sometimes some shooting, but so matter some you may get it. Yabure Mendoa, some satin, some cotton and the so will a Pumbule Tension Bangachi Mendoa, some satin, some cotton and the Dagba Chibu Rawachi Mendu, some Rawa, Ragbar, some cotton and the Tombanis, the Tara, Mamu Samlutan Yora. Oh, Tindachi Samlutan Tati, Tome Maribase. Koya Zawase, oh, the Yala Jungi Shanda Kanga Panche, you had the Teleton Yungi, but the Hakotoa. Yeah, what did Tome Maripat in the Sarata? What did you love?
So then that initial ignorance is referred to as the root of samsara, in the sense that it is this first link that gives rise to all of the rest of them. Like we see in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, it says then first holding to a thought of I and then mine, beings sort of go in this like water wheel of samsara. So we first have a thought of I as being like solid, really, truly existent, and then mine. And then we think like my religion, my people, and so forth. And so here, to be able to investigate this, and again, there are many different levels of subtlety too in understanding of selflessness or emptiness. So whether we are contemplating that there can't be an I separate and apart from the aggregates, or whether there can't be an I that is permanent, unitary, and independent or autonomous, whatever level it is that we are thinking of, beginning by addressing that kind of initial ignorance, attacking that ignorance through recognizing that this is where all of the rest of the causes of samsara come from. This is the really crucial point for initial ignorance.
Oh yeah, ta nipa tsakhen derwa, ta nipa derda, thome mari ba se tindriwa she. Oh, ta nipa duji ji le de she yora, le sunji de she yora, rimu tone. Kando sin rimu kare rosna, tsakhen ji ne nazo chebe piri se do, zama songe chigi ne je mambu ko din da poba dan ramendra mi dan chik tindre ramendra chemo che soya te se yora. Tinte songechi rimuti shawara. Te pe chani shawara, rimuti kari shawara, tangzi marik be wangi se, tatun zimba, nga se rangwa, rangwe ne chi yoban zimba te wangi shawara. Nambar sheba la leji paksha, koar, namshi shawara, nambar sheba tela, ene ta leji paksha. Leji baksha kawar chechi sikdwa, ta le saw yora, tome maribe kune lani, leji baksha kawar chechi. Sange chiribe kowe kewa, pembar chebe niban duji ki le de sambay nos. O ta chi, sakhen tege, sakhen yine, kayu sugu yina, sheku sugu yina, dhamendra sugurwa neche. O dhamendra suwa nashi, Tome maribe kune lane, samlo kunu de kune lane. Ene ta le drabendra sagre, kevele ta mi kevele ta luma tele, lunga ke choba semgi samlo ta, sangbo ta ngeba ta parma, lunga ke choba le sangbo ta ngeba parma che, kewa mi kewa luma tele se de sagyora. O chiribe kore kewa penche ki, niban duji ki le se, niban drebu rabdu duchi gege, 이번 두시기 내 사단데 디페데 돈에 쉐기오레 시거라 오야 티치라
So, second, then we have the image of a potter that illustrates conditioning factors or formative action, the second link of the 12 links of dependent origination. So, first, we have then that initial ignorance represented by the blind woman. And due to that ignorance, we then engage in a variety of actions. So, here, the second image is a potter creating a variety of pots. So this illustrates the second factor of dependent arising of conditioning factors or compositional activity, which has to do with our karma. So the power of the ignorance that apprehends a self plants certain karmic dispositions in the consciousness. So first we have that kind of ignorance, and due to the ignorance, we then engage in various actions in turn giving rise to positive, negative, neutral actions. So in the way like a potter, or a glass worker or anybody who's making a variety of things has a motivation and then creates something out of that. So too, due to the first link of ignorance, we then have the second link of conditioning factors or as it says here, compositional activity, wherein due to the power of that ignorance, we create various actions. And these conditioning factors then lay predispositions, kind of latencies on the consciousness, and these conditioning factors project rebirth in cyclic existence that are either favorable or unfavorable. So it is then the second link that is the action motivated by that initial ignorance.
Oh yeah. Dan Gira Lady Car Kursu Situ Niban Duji Lady Chagbada, Down Nigewangi, Miguel Sayora. Sosola Chagbe Wangi, Sosoton that to get shadow. Trama Chizunga, Napsin, Simla Soba Miguel Chuyura. Oh, and now Condre Wangi, Miguel Sayora. So Chagbada, Trishella Troada, Dada Tagi, or the Chagbe Wangi, and then Miguel Sasuna. And they got so there. Oh, Yawayita, Tantoli Kitchen later and Guara. Da Condre Wangi, the Kivele Sayomara, Rala Chagbe Wangi. Nara Yabuchena Maton Digmare, some Chisonali Abu Digmare, Kawachimba Yabu Digmare, some Susulia, Shenjaguangi, Chimpa, Tamapa, Chizupa, Mikiwa Chupa, and the champagne is some Lukiwachu Trupsuna. Till less asuna, Lunga less asuna, till had a military less aviora. So, yes, only kitchen lady, Chardaniga Wangi Sayadua. Dentro mille kitchen Condre Wangi to Sayo Marte, Chagbe Wangi, and the less Sambu de Sagadua. Night in the Chena Digmare, some Sage, Roa. Or teach it in Niban Dujig Latilla, Sayate, Chardangi Wangi Sagadua. Oh, teach your cursor. Oh, this is love, don't you get it? Mount.
So here, then the second link of formative actions. When we think about this, these are the kinds of actions, the karmas that we create that then in turn lead to a future rebirth. So when we have that initial ignorance, that then can lead to attachment and hatred or animosity. So when we engage in negative actions, negative karma can be motivated by either attachment or hatred or any of our other afflictions. And so we might engage in harsh speech, in divisive speech, in lying, in maliciousness, in covetousness, and so forth. The 10 non-virtues are motivated by one of those afflictions, either attachment or hatred or one of the others. And that in turn leads us to create karma, formative actions that will lead to rebirth in the lower realms as a hell being, a hungry ghost, or an animal. And it is, though, out of attachment that we can create virtuous actions. So when we create karma, it is going to lead to a further rebirth within samsara. But if we have created positive actions out of attachment to ourselves or our side and wanting good things for ourselves, say we do actions that are beneficial, we abandon the 10 non-virtues, for example, that kind of virtuous karma can lead to rebirth as a human or a god. So when it comes to our our negative actions, that can be motivated by either attachment or hatred or any of our other afflictions. But really, when it comes to our virtuous karma, this is normally motivated out of a kind of attachment, an attachment to the self, wanting good things. But in either case, it is leading to renewed rebirth within samsara.
Oh, yeah. That's it, Tameba. Musum do Tone, Chagdan Ponsona. Roa Seba Paroa. Seba Ponsona, Quagia Yomare. Tene less of a Inako, less under Quagia Larry Yomara. Tame Tombani come, Manet Tanzindi, Musum do Toya come, Tanzin Namjunga Zulo Langi Nalanga, Samsa, Nalingi was some listua, Tipe Mangecha. Then it Tewangi less I am ever chasuna, Chardango less I am ever chasuna, Tipana Chadan Pandora. Chardango less I am at the Quagia less out to say your mother. Quagia less I your mother. Seba metu tene ngar kyo thoma mebana sa sebe le yunaya tela setam geng seba mere keba seba kubelemba kora ti metu tondo che gen dru sabe de sale yunaya chumena ene sabe de debuke yo mara o tina shi charura ngema sa sebe le yuna tezu debu me yo mare karse lenji che gen seba de sto sarwa o ti inde ta ngar sa sebe le to Never mean a quite get to mare, Satu Savio mare, or Tene Tarwa Topsane. At the less anako, Kivel has argued or a chimba to the Sabakarisana, Qua Pensigale Omara. teach labda. Yeah.
So, by developing a direct realization of selflessness, one can counteract, one eliminates that kind of initial ignorance that grasps at there being a solid, concrete, real, truly existent kind of self. And once you have eliminated that kind of holding to a self, one is no longer then going to have the eighth and ninth factors of craving and grasping. So, when you eliminate that factor of craving that leads to the kind of ripening of the karmas that one has previously accumulated. Again, once you have eliminated the sense of a self, of an I, that gets rid of that link of craving, which in turn leads to the ripening, the sort of nurturing of those previously accumulated karmic seeds, which leads to renewed rebirth. So through having eliminated that, even though you might have previously accumulated karma, it can no longer ripen and bring results. It doesn't have the proper kind of coordinating condition of that craving and grasping to cause renewed rebirth. And thereby one achieves liberation. So once one has eliminated that, whatever kind of positive activities, engaging in the six perfections and generosity and ethics and so forth, are not creating karma that leads to renewed rebirth because one has eliminated the fundamental cause of that.
Oh yeah. Tene sa tene lanye ji wange. Tachon bare re sasuna. Tanda yebe lute dorkerwa te tor sasuna ta le da nyomo be shawan de kyone pumbun dole che go maro. Ta lu rab tene lanye yore te yilu sigra. Yijirang shin ki lu se. So rawan me ban dorgo ba kichi che ko ba tene yo mare. Rồi, 제가 나실로 소베통에 텐데 녀먹고 봐. 어디 류라에 요르봐. 류라에 요르 생기 올라 때네. 산제르 비네 생올이야. 근데 담에 베껴 이제네. 나도 나시 미베 소르시 때 요르마도 덜 거라. 뒤제 몰람다 레게 와게 어떤데 미소수 슈바다 마슈바 산제르 지나 미소수 슈 냥엘인데 제 요르와. The two dancers are number chana. Marazu Tunzuli Tinde Shioramato, Sangelia Ramaba Kishiada, Tinde Yongi Amara, or Tijila Tindis.
So, upon having attained that kind of arhatship, one will then cast off these aggregates that have been taken up due to contaminated karma and afflictions. And it's not as though then one absolutely doesn't have a body, but rather can take up a mental body, a kind of body that is in the nature of mind, that is not subject to the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. It doesn't have the same kind of sufferings of samsara because one is no longer creating those kinds of causes. In that kind of a case wherein one has taken up a mental body to the sort of perspective of others, one might appear as an ordinary being and still being subject to the kinds of sufferings of samsara, dying and so forth. But really that is just a projection. Once one has taken rebirth in a mental body due to the force of prayers and the kind of ripening factors, one is no longer subject to the various kinds of sufferings of samsara, although it may appear to others as though one is.
Oh yeah, do said that. Oh yeah, then that's Sumba Namshe Dera. Sumba dele Remo Cardo Sena. Sumba Chu Shandong Lan Zebe Pirikis, Piuchi Tigua. The Shandong Galia Zadengiche. Quar Gewa Penji, Kidigi Legi, Neva Pasha. Zenji, Koi Kichi, Lady Pakshan, Zengig Namshit Sigura, Paksha de Kawada Miguel Lekasane, nobody Namshit into Teda Yora Paksha. Jawa Chiman Yinzam Jongenge, Sumba Namshit Sobayese, or Sumba Namshi said, that Niban Duji Lesa, Lady Nubanya Dengenge, Namshichiwara, tell us Sumba Namshi Sigua. Kyo pa lentong kudu ji namshi sikra tela pa kyo lantong genge namshi tere dani o ti de sumba namshi sikra Kiawala Nizam John Gange, Sumba Namshi de Chonsia. Oh, teacher. Sumba Namshi, the Namshi, you are taught the tournament. Namshi Delia, Kudujin Namshis, Jedujin Namshis Niwudwa. Kudujin Namshis de Tanda Kiawalan Gange and Drongange Namshi Telesigora. The Kuit and Ritandura. Piga Namsa Nizam Jane Namshi Tambushidua. The Namshi de Jedujin Namshisira. Tan Drebu leg and Drebu Mimbek of the Namshisira. Oh, that the Sumba Namshi de Sumba Yense. Tanda de Kudujin Namshi de Shegdua. Oh, yeah. Yeah, teach you, Lana.
Oh. So then following the first and second images representing initial ignorance and then formative actions, we have then the third image, which represents consciousness, particularly consciousness at the time of the cause or causal consciousness, is the image is of a monkey climbing in a tree. And this illustrates the third factor of dependent arising consciousness. Again, particularly that consciousness that holds the kind of latencies or imprints that have been created through previous karmic actions. So consciousness holds the potencies or karmic predispositions of virtuous and non-virtuous karma that project rebirths in cyclic existence. And it is what makes the connection to the next lifetime. So here one has, when one first motivated by initial ignorance, engages in various actions, those actions then leave latencies or potencies on this consciousness. And here we are identifying the kind of causal time consciousness, the time in which those latencies or potencies are laid down or are placed on that consciousness. And then we can speak as well about the kind of resultant time consciousness. Once one takes rebirth, there's that first moment of consciousness that is connected to a new lifetime, and that is particularly the resultant time consciousness. So here what is being referred to is that consciousness at the time in which those potencies are being laid down by the karma that we have created.
Oh, yeah. That Tuzin, Chunali, Tuzin, Yara. Tuzin, le Shube Pirigis, Tuzin Chiche, Tiora. Take Aritangresana, Shiba Mingsu Setera. Mig Nawa Nache, Wombo, Na Madure, Tanda Mig. Ombo na ombo ne ombo che ombo to tujura yi yombo to yorba ko sheba yeso to yora o to so tanda ma cha yo mare cha tu yo mare pame kudani din de yorma to shenda te me na wa na to so cha tu yo mara na chi ombo na ma de be se ma cha be par je namshe tembe se namshe tensa ge namshe de pe shu sara Ame Kogbana Shusar, Milikewa Shisha Cherda, Milikewa Shisha, Ame Kogbanalia Shusare. No. And then Kuda Dubala, Suji Pumbuta, Tela Nebe, Number Shebata, Sobuchaya, Tenders, and Namshe Tensake, Kuda did Yesara, oh, teacher Pumbuta, Tela Nebe, Number Shebata, Namshe de Shusara. Te cordo yebe soa doshi semba te kundunga nani shenda zu yongura sheba nyamdo sama yongura soa doshi semba regba yile sheba seto sigara o te inde number sheba da te cordo yebe soa dan doshi to zulia mingi pumbu sigara sobo chasa ke pame kudra sigara namshe tensa te sogi pumbu sigara Tetan Java de Chasare, Sheba Teta, Pame Kudan Dubati, Luchaya Tetan Java Chasarwa, the Suji Pumbu Chasara. Then Namshi Yosa de Kotsoa and the Shesemba Rebachi Yorbangaras, Minashi Tembo Mena, Konakari Surguneshi Soja Tegiora, or Tela Mingshi Pumbu Sidua. So soon as Mavache, Mingipa Taya Pumbu Sonza Mingshi Pumbu Segira, or Tatunda, Suji Pumbu Sudu Kudan Duva Namshi Tensa. Mingi Pumbus do Tinto Namshi Yusa Soan do Shesamba Rapatus Yora, Tela Mingi Pumbus, Pumbunga de Trupsara. Oh, Tenekarsa. Devala Pumbuta Tela Nebe, number Shepata Te, Kotjo, Soan Dushin Dushina Mingi, Pumbu Yela Tundre, Kisi Ye Kapi Minsu Nami Ye, Pumbu Minsu Chirba, Shiba Minsu Chirba Tendre said somebody answered that day. Minsu, Shiba Minsu Silabra, Minsu Chirba Snell, Shiba Minsu. So should do Sobu Chasage, Dancer, Kudraticha. Minsu do Tinam Singam do Yebe, Simju Kundung and Shanda to Sivara. Yeah. Oh, the Shiba Minsu did somebody answered. That Jawalan Sarada, Jawalan Betambu Tambu, Jawatera. Yeah.
So here, then the fourth image depicts getting into a boat, like a boat that we would use to cross water or something. And so here, this illustrates the varieties of name and form. So form here is the combination of semen and ovum, which is dependent on the consciousness until its transformation into the sense faculties of the eye, ear, nose, and tongue. And name, so here, when it comes to first the form, when in this link of name and form is referring to when a being has first taken rebirth. This is within the sort of next life or the rebirth that they have taken. And at this point, then form, it refers to the combination of semen and ovum, which is in turn dependent upon the consciousness. When the consciousness enters that womb, then and connects with that form, in turn, that is the basis for a future being. And so this then contains or is the sort of dependent upon the consciousness until its transformation into the sense faculties of the eye, ear, nose, and tongue. So although there's the body faculty already and the mental consciousness, those other sense powers have yet to develop, or the sense faculties, I should say. And so then name is the consciousness that resides within the aggregate or with the aggregate of form. It's concomitant mental processes of discrimination and feelings and the compositional factors. So name refers to the non-form compositional factors, including consciousness and feelings, discrimination, and so forth. And this then this fourth image illustrates any combination of name and form, the aggregates that are a karmic ripening at the moment when the birth stage occurs. So here, with this combination of name and form, again, form referring to the combination of semen and ovum, which is dependent on the consciousness, and then name being the consciousness and those concomitant mental factors that occur with that. This is really referring to that first the ripening, the aggregates that are a karmic ripening at the moment when the birth stage occurs, when one has taken rebirth.
Oh yeah, doing that. Tadi tanda kanjo thome marikba sheso, niban duchi sheso, suba namshe che, shiba minsu si kewalan so. Ta tela ya ko dish keba seba, kuba lemba chuba sebe le sumde yorwa. Ina sheho mar tanda kewa chema landu san pige keba seba kuba lemba se yangshi shegra te de tige she tobgirwa te sonza de panche chigne chi do khoye de kanga shen tanda ya delia keba seba kuba lemba chuba sebe le sheho mar mato korwa tome maru kuna niba du le sa sumba namshi che shiba minsu se kewa langbala keba seba kuba lemba nibu tige niban dochi ki le sumba namshik tendu yobatu nuba tuchen duche ane nuba tuchen duche tsare chuba sibe le che ane shine kya langura sa sumbu de mashabe rimato neva marwa ti kuyora o tichi shena ya.
So here, in terms of this explanation, we have explained how there is this initial ignorance, which leads to formative actions, which in turn leaves potencies on the consciousness. And then here, with this fourth name and form, we see then the sort of indicating the karmic ripening, the aggregates that are a karmic ripening at the moment of when the birth stage occurs. Now here, in this way of explaining, we are not at this moment explaining then ripen the factors of the 8th, 9th, and 10th factors of craving, grasping, and becoming. But it is the case that in order to have a rebirth, you need to have that kind of craving and grasping, which in turn makes potent, like gives sort of efficacy to the formative actions that one has previously accomplished. Those have to be sort of ripened or nurtured into existence. So here, although in terms of the way in which this is explained to describe the kind of birth process, we don't at this point see an explanation of the necessity of the 8th, 9th, and 10th links. Those are actually necessary in order for one to take rebirth. You have to have the factors of craving, grasping, and in turn becoming, which allows that karmic potency to ripen.
Oh yeah. Tatanda delia kewa sum shegi wara tende yangla chungni shedu kewa sum lo ko shekamni shegi wara. Cheza ko tanda de chi she swa kewa tambu tome maru ko ngibandu ji sumba nam she kewa chi rawa. Shiba mingsu she ngaba ke ji toba ba tumba sowa she chi kewa chi shegi do. Shiba chujiba kewa si yang kewa chi ma kewa sum shegi do. Kewa sum shegi wara sumbu re le tende yangla ngeji ina panje ko tende yangla chungni yongura ina kanga shegi medua je kashe kewa ngama liyo tigi parvatile chene she togure kewa chima kewa da kashi se shedu tangma tuzule yo de chene she togura oti inde tenda kewa chine dus korne kema cheje kore de hako ye chedo kewa chik jangjang li chane shegi omare o teacher labna this one.
So when it comes to the explanation of the 12 links of dependent origination, normally these are explained over the course of 3 lifetimes, right? So in one life, we would have the kind of initial ignorance and then formative actions and the causal consciousness. And then in the next life, we have our name and form and the 6 sense bases and so forth. And in turn, when we get to then birth and aging and death, we'd have to speak of a different life. So when it comes to the kind of explanation of the 12 links of dependent origination in order, we are understanding this kind of causal process, but it's not the causality that occurs within a single lifetime. One is getting an understanding of this process, but when it comes to the way that they actually play out, it is over multiple lifetimes. And this highlights the kind of way in which this is cyclical, in which we are constantly contributing to the causes that lead to renewed rebirth within samsara.
Oh yeah. Da debuche. Da kangba ngaba deredo. Ngaba de. Ngabe pe remodel kardo se kangba tombe perisido kangba tomba sidwa ene te karese ngundu ji sibe kabje nami ji pumbur jurbe mina sojo ambo sardo tebe ngaba keje de seba yinsa o da kangba tomba de kartresna kangba tombe pe da remotege karisembresna ngundu ji sibe kabje nami ji pumbur jurbe Mina sojo ombo sardo tebe ngaba keje de sambesa o de megi ombo na ombo ne ombo che ombo la soba tezuko sardo ta tebe o de ngaba keje de sam megi keje na keje ne keje sera luji keje sa megi keje na keje o tezu tube kaptele shege ore sera ya tejilamna munde je seba sore o ngaba kangba tombe perejira mundu je sebe kapje na meje pumbur jobe mena soje ombo sardo tebe keche mundu je seba sto seba dela seba shiva kisi shiva kemataba de kisi ba ene shiva de ngamane shiva de kisi shiva kisi so tambo dela chive wande tambo kisi de che tene parsi de tu tene kisi de tu ti chema yo etelio mundu ji sebasira ena tanda ganzo ji yede de mundu ji sebal netero ganzo kanga pamban ni zam cha tene she ne michane de garwa mundu sebara ta chema shisuna chisi de tu garwa chema wando chena sang mundu ji sebaside Joa Karilangi in a take of Kochalan Sarwatanda, take up ye meg now me in a me, Tundro in a Tundro, to me now Nala Sobatas troop de Capitalisora, Mundi Sibas, Sibashina and Mundi Siba. Panja Jene Tambu Chisisha, Jene Persisha, Tene Kisisha, Tendesene to Angamachi on the Shana, the man at Chigi on the Tambu Kisisha, Roa. Tene Mundi Sibasha, Tene Chisisha, Tene Persisha to Smanton and Yora. Tanda Ganzumundi Sibal Neta Yora. Yeah, teach you love.
So then the fifth image is an empty house. This illustrates the fifth factor of dependent arising, the six sense bases. This is the newly formed sensory faculties, visual, auditory, and so on, which are the aggregates that are a karmic ripening during the existence stage, which is previous to death. So here, when it comes to then this fifth of these links, this illustrates through a kind of an empty house, the newly formed sensory faculties. And these are referred to as the aggregates that are a karmic ripening during the existence stage, which is previous to death. So here, there's sort of various existence stages we can talk about. There's kind of the birth existence, usually that becoming moment. And then there is the kind of existence stage previous to death. So there are four of these. There's sort of our birth stage. We could talk about the then being in the stage which is previous or prior to death. And then there would be the death existence followed by bardo, which in turn then leads to another birth existence and so forth. And so here, when it comes to then this fifth factor of the six sense bases, this is referring to the kind of life that we have right now, the existence stage, which is previous to death. So before our death comes, what we have now is the kind of existence stage prior to death. Among those four, the birth existence, bardo existence, death existence, and then sometimes it's translated as prior existence, meaning that which is before we die, the existence that we are in.
Oh, yeah. Peace one. Oh, that Trupa did it. Trupa. Tugu Puchu Chadisha. Ochebe, Piriki, Yuan Namshi Sum Sardo, Dune Yujin Jua, Sheber Shebe, and then Simju Tuba, Regba de Chesta, Tagi Wombo, Tesara, Megombo Nambu Luan to Tesara, Titu Yuda train and Yoa de Mesara, Tatanda Shine Yuda train, Rexa Rabachine, Sobu, Rexa de Tema Teta, Tinde Yogu Sera, Luan the troops had. Take a reject Yavada do at the Tichi source till a regbody Yongora, Chavate. Use or Tiogora. Tiabatalia Corsera. To what requasido, to what regba. Regba did somebody, Yatini, to do.
So then next, the sixth image depicts kissing a child, which illustrates the sixth factor of dependent arising, contact. So contact is a mental factor that once the object, sensory faculty, and consciousness newly come together, distinguishes the attributes of the object. So here, this is a mental factor, contact, which is based upon the previous link of those six sense bases. So our six sense faculties are newly formed, and then they begin to contact various objects. So the coming together of those sensory faculties, consciousness, and the object then leads to this sixth factor of contact, which is depicted as it's kissing a child.
Oh, yeah, this, yeah, that timber did, timber. Kibu Migla and Dasu be Pirikis, Remutukarusne, Michi Mili and Dajam Shantashi Jam Dasu Dangishore. Oh. Tene Yuan Namshi Sum Dube Regbe changes. Ta Yuche Wambuche Namshi Sum Duro Anyamdo. yu wangbo to sarani yu reksharabi lugi reksharabi ane tela tena namshi soati tu nyongengi namshi she sumde tup sarda tupgiyara. Kibu mila dasu be piriki yuwa namshi sum dube rekbe kengi semla tsona sheshir jowe titu nyongari chebe timba tsorwa de chebe ta tsowa yongori shine. Ma ame koba de yuna sobu liwa de trupshe reksharabi tema teta tinde yongora. O di trupwa rekwa timba tsorwa se tsora. Yuwa namshi sum trebala tene ta tsowa titu di yakbudu samsa koye megudu samsa de bata mende bata rawa o tindegi tsowa ti yongora. Dewa tunga parmasum ti yongora. Tisilana.
So then the seventh image is a person whose eye is being pierced by an arrow. This illustrates the seventh factor of dependent arising, feeling. So the condition of contact, which arises from the assembly of the object, sensory faculty, and consciousness, causes an experience of pleasure or pain to arise in the mind, predominantly experienced as a feeling. So here we have then beginning with the time in which one is in the womb, when that form is established, and then one has these 6 sense bases, and due to the sense faculties, consciousness, and consciousness coming into contact with an object, this then gives rise to various feelings. So this can begin from the time in which one is still in the womb. One has that form established, those faculties established, and thereby gives rise to the experience of feeling, wherein there's a sense of like, oh, this is good or this is bad, pleasurable, painful, and so forth.
Oh yeah, this one. Yeah. That did it, Geba Kibu Chantong at Pirikisa, Michi Chantong that gets Shivtua. Larian Kiwa Chima Penji Gese, that Kiwa Chima Penji Ge, Geba Seba de Shayora. That in a Soa to do Yonge Chasarwa, Tinema remember Manganeke, Mezekora, Soa to do Mabuyancha Rodera. Tanta my Cobenalio, the Tineba teaching and ma teaching the court saw Tewa Tungetan Mecinalia, Darkage Drabadashe and soon Damida Toya, Kalan Drabadasai, that's what to do Tewa Tungetan Mabuchin Yondera. Tinyon is or Tamatamatalia, Tanji de Chima, Yachima drag, Latelia, Sertamge. Sertam should let the never to gentle soedera. Sabiorese tab Shingsa Yaguchani Telechuche, Titata Lutus Camnani, and Nuba Tuchenia Kevgura, or Tinashin Sigara. Kawachima Drage, Lelia, Niban Duchigi Lelia, certain Tinduba Chambus Darwa, Kavasebas, Kovaleba, Tia Sotabgora, Kavaseba Tege. The Tamatama Mesekorana Seba the Mabuyorata Mesekora Kira, Tamatelia Chigalamarachilia Chana Seba de Mendevase, Mendesebe de Chasedwa. Tachi Sosochi Mevra Chedrach de Tiganga Meva Machana Samsa, Tita Sentita Nelu Longjuta, Soa the Madrena Samsagi, Samlichungora, Mendesebe de Chasedwa. Paruche Toya Mera Chati, Pancha Luluche Shinasiorda, Tomja Kobjalchi, Stabshi Chenishira Toya Skitis Pancha Yongumara, and a Kuval ambassador Yan Chiklea, Yan Toya Yonasam, Saya da Yona Samsarich Yusera, Tagochi Mevachadich Yona Samsarich, the Kuval ambassador, Shukcher Dora, Kevasebate. Mendena Samsasura, Tatanechi Tomna Samsaga, Yona Samsarachi, Toya Yona Samsachi, Yona Samsa, Tindeseba Shukchibegora, Tila Kubel Ambassador, 자 개바 세바도 그거 렘바 니부터게 냐마 사샤게 니반 두치길래 개메게 가야로 하실랴 수답게 와라 네바 두첸도 치게 와라 야 뒤질랍나 개바 세바들랍나 담보 알았어.
So then we get to the eighth image of a person drinking beer, which illustrates the eighth factor of dependent arising craving. And this is a craving for pleasure and freedom from pain, which further makes potent the karma that projects future rebirth. So here we have, again, to look at this process, this kind of feelings that arise based upon there being then a kind of contact between the various sensory faculties, consciousness, and various objects. And so here it is that begins kind of in the womb. We have various feelings. And then once we are actually born, throughout all of our lives, we see all kinds of different things. We experience all kinds of different sights and sounds and objects and have various different kinds of feelings. Now, these links of the eighth and ninth links of craving and grasping are really the kind of we have craving and grasping of all different kinds, but these are the factors that cause the karmic actions that we have previously accumulated to be nurtured, to be sort of made potent such that they can cause future rebirth. It causes those kinds of, it creates the conditions for those karmic causes that we have created in the past to become potent, to sort of become effective. So we have craving for various things throughout our lives. We have the kind of desire to have things or not be separated from things. But this in particular is referring to craving at the time of our death, wherein we don't want to be separated from all it is to be alive. There's a kind of craving for existence. Now, when we are killed suddenly, or if we die suddenly, maybe all of these things happen in a much more rapid kind of succession. But when it comes to the time of our death, there's a sense of like wanting to hold on to something that we feel we are going to lose, a kind of existence. There's a craving to still be alive, this feeling of wanting something or needing that kind of existence. And in turn, that particular kind of craving and then grasping at the time of death is what creates the kind of potencies of those previously accumulated karmas to lead to a future rebirth. So these factors, particularly of craving and grasping, although these are things that we accumulate, we engage in throughout all of our life, this is particularly referring to those at the time of death that are craving for existence.
Oh yeah, 진짜. 진짜 내가 투제도 좋아지베. 대화 토바도 동해다 대화를 세베데 쳐스 진짜 쏴서. 디디버셔. 딱 구바 들어와. 구바. 다 되죠. 다 되더라. 다들 개발세바도 구바 렘바셔서 안 들려야. 또 더기 이게 가지고 토메메를 끊는 이번들 내서 순반함시 시바 민수치도 개발세바 구발렘바 주바세바도 시바서 뒤다 천이 시고요라. 전에시 교와 치마들려야 주집에 교와 중이바 거시치를 했던 데서면 시도 거시치를 했던 데서마도야 개발세바 구발렘바 시액 말에 토메메로 이번들 주 순반함시도 시액마도 뒤다 이게 시바되게 천이 시고요라. 교와 치마데서요다 견이야 치마들라 주집에 교와 중이바 거시치를 했던 데서 니마도 시액마도 샹다 강가 땅마 교와 바르바다 뒤땅마를 시바 토메마르바 니바도 주 순반남시도 땅말 시사라 개바세바 구발렘바 주바세바데 단단 대시액도 되게 천에 시고요라 야 어디지 람넥담보
So then that gets into the eighth factor of craving and grasping, which in turn lead to a future existence, becoming. So here, when we are going through the 12 links of dependent origination, although it is the case that we have the kind of craving and grasping which foster or nurture that karmic potency into a future rebirth, they aren't explicitly explained early earlier. Like we have, again, initial ignorance that leads to formative actions, which then leave potencies on the consciousness. And in turn, then we take rebirth as a being. However, here again, the way in which these are explained, those kinds of links which lead to the ripening of that karma and lead to a future rebirth are explained here as 8, 9, and 10, and don't explicitly get explained in the 1, 2, 3, and 4. However, we should understand that their sort of role in that process of taking rebirth. And so too, when it comes to the last 2 of these 12 links of dependent origination of birth and then aging and death, there are many more factors that are involved there, right? We need to understand the way in which these are sort of interlocking, and the explanation that occurs of one at one point is illustrative of how it functions within the larger context of the 12 links of dependent origination.
Well, this one, yeah. Talk about Kibu Shendo, got a Kibu Shendo, Shindo, name be Pirigis or Michig, Shendo, Shindo, Lingi, and then look at a Sibe Longe, the Tobe Shadows, Siba Coag, Longe, the Tobe Shasuara, Sagwar Chaban de Sha, Kubalabata, Tadusha, Kubalabata to do Sarshara. The love so, yeah, teacher Lamna, Kubalabata.
So then we turn to the 9th image, which is of a person picking fruit from a tree, which illustrates the 9th factor of dependent arising, which is grasping. This is a form of attachment, an excessive craving for the resources of existence for the sake of obtaining them. So in the 8th, we have this kind of craving that sort of further makes potent that karma and projects further rebirth. And then with the 9th, grasping, this is a form of attachment or excessive craving, which again, in turn leads to the sort of making potent those previously accumulated karmas and leads to becoming.
Oh, yeah. This one. Oh, yeah, teacher. Kubalabata do so. Chitanko Sebaside, Tambo Chaya de la Sebasigora, Lambaside Shukcherichin, Toyag Kabi Sebatella, Lambas Shukchijun to the Lechadoa, Tanda Delia, Mende Seben de Cha, Yang Seba, Yang Savage, Lag Tilicharoa, or Chidaya gave Sebase, the Lambaside, Shechijun Chana, Tambo Cha to go do some, Tayaya Tabshi Kabi Sebatella. Lembatendresha Yongoa, Tendrimasha. Yeah. Top no de los antimatter. Permit to my period, top for me, Poji Yobashi, Tomashi, this Ramutiva. The Sebada Lemba, Lemba Narji Niba, Duchi Yelela, sweat of the Yansi Chima, Pembala, Nuva Tujendo, Juba Sibe. She Kulan Devi, Sibe, Koye, Mingi Takba, Chuba Sibe led somebody knows. That day, Chuba Sibe led some Pemichila Puja University, Tangaran Jidene, Kechora Chabe Kechera. The Chuba Sibe led Shagora. Oh, Anakade Siba de Sume. Oh, Tita. To the land never to send to Cuba to the Cuba Sibas, Joachima de la Sibasera, Cordoba, Koi Joachimate, Lealia, never to J, Cuba Chazandovci, Sansons, the debut mean the Q led the Latasharva. Cuba Sibeles over there. Siba, Koi Joa Pensic, land never to Gendelia, Cuba Sibeles, Sharwa. Siba Coater Sigora, the Coetua Chima de Leag, never to Jenson, Devi being the Cula Sutane, Sibeles, even to see land never to Jen to Shevatera, Sebata Leben never to Jen to Shevatera. Oh, 오늘 가라 니바 두지게 레라 소탑도 양세 치마 페발라 니바 투젠도 규르베 슈바시베레 귤란 데부시베 메게 타베 슈바시베 레데 쳔버시바 오티 르무텔라테니 티 코르체고데 에스고데 야 틸라나데스.
So here, with regard to the 8th and 9th links, craving and grasping, first we have that kind of craving that arises. And really, grasping is kind of like a strengthening of that craving. So when we have a craving, there is a desire for something. But once we kind of go toward actively seeking that out, wanting to get that thing, then it becomes grasping. So when we have a kind of thought of wish for further existence, followed by the sort of making an effort at that, more like grasping for a further existence, this is where craving goes from being craving to grasping. So we should look at these as being one kind of a strengthening of the other. And then when we are ready to be born, here then the 10th image is a pregnant woman, which illustrates the 10th factor of dependent arising, becoming. So craving and grasping nurture the karma of the previous second factor, conditioning factors, and this karma now becomes potent and can project the next rebirth. So calling this karma the 10th factor, becoming, is a case of giving the name of the effect, becoming or cyclic existence, to the cause. So here, this 10th factor of becoming, and here there are various kinds of translations of this because it's the same word that we use as for cyclic existence. And this is referring to the sort of moment when, due to the factors of craving and grasping, the kind of potency is of the karma that one has previously accumulated become potent enough to give rise to a future rebirth, to project the next rebirth. And so this then is a case of giving that cause the name of the result. So one will become or be existent, and that is then given to the cause, that potent, fully ripened, like that karma that has the potential to give rise to a rebirth is then given the name of becoming, which is really the effect of that. So this 10th image of the pregnant woman then is illustrating the factor of dependent arising called becoming, which is when the second factor, conditioning factors or formative actions, have become potent enough to actually lead to projecting another rebirth.
Oh yeah, so this one. That Chuchibarwa. Chuchiba permit to go Chebe Pirige. That permit to put Chigiva, Sanjera. Niajerich, not near the Brestingra. Pirige, Legi Siba Le Tetan Driver, Yansi Chime, Jawa, Siba Chuchiba, Jawa, somebody knows. That they could put Chigiva de Chuchiba. So the
11th image is a woman giving birth to an infant, which illustrates the 11th factor of dependent arising called birth. This is the birth stage of the next lifetime, a rebirth arisen from and connected to the karma called becoming. So birth then is the first moment of the birth stage of the next lifetime, and it is then connected to and arisen from the karma that is called becoming, that 10th factor, which in turn gives rise to the next life, this birth.
This one, oh yeah. That's Chuchibandi, that's Chunibarwa. Tom Dengi, me, Roku, Piriki, Kiva Langba Teta, Delwe, Kiva Nasu Shandu Jurwe, Kawata, Pumbi, Ritu, Dorwe, Shiva de Chuniba, Kashichirik Betende, Sambayenose. Oh, Tita, Chunibaderwa. Tom Dens Pelina. Can get a mimic say or Kanga Lavachangamade, Koran mimic say you are till a Tom Dance shower, Tom Dan Dembasser, Cookie do the Kanga Levache, Sama teacher, robache kol nyambara tichigra tel tom desegora ta tenda ro lega chenge tuzuma kidwa tichigra lejibasu tom dengi meruku epirikis o mitsuta rodo kidwa re tuzumuti shora ti karlangora karchongora sana karkoko yorsna piriki kewa langba teda delwe kewe nasu shendo jube kawata kewa lang sarche ane tikdamda che yake tama shindwa pumbuta luta sem kagan roate pumbu rite dores number sheba de pumbu mi pumbu de torne shandaj sem gi kunde shandaj rugora pumbu rite mi rite gi pumbu dorate shiwa de choniba gashi chiribe tende sabe nose ta kewa chema telia sujiba kewa choniba gashi chiribe tende smada shanda shiba meso ngaba keji to shema do tagin shema tama tele sheba de chone sheku yora oya tichlamna ya.
So then the 12th image is an undertaker carrying a human corpse, which illustrates the 12th factor of dependent arising, aging and death. Aging is the transformation of the physical state of the being you have been born as in the above rebirth. Death occurs when that aging being sheds his or her respective aggregates. So here, this and the word that has been translated as undertaker is really someone who is endowed with power. So in Tibet particularly, there were those who specifically worked with corpses, who had the kind of duties of taking care of the dead, and people would give gifts to them and so forth so that they would take care of bodies. I mean, I'm not sure if it's that sort of stiff here in the United States, but here, those beings then who carry a human corpse are illustrative of this 12th factor of dependent arising, which is aging and death. And so aging occurs with this sort of transformation of the physical aggregates that we have been born in, and death is when that aging being sheds his or her respective aggregates, as in the future life, when one casts off whatever kind of physical aggregates one had of this life, the body and the mind separate and they go to a future life. Death then is referring to that process or that time wherein the body and the mind separate. One casts off the body of this life and moves into a future life. So again, as we have seen throughout this, the 11th image of, or sort of the 11th of these 12 links of birth, then is followed immediately by aging and death. However, in between there, we need to understand, although it is not explicitly explained, the link of name and form and the 6 sense bases and contact and feeling and so forth, which occur on that stage of existence after one has been born and before there is aging and death. So here again, although these follow this kind of order, we need to understand the way in which these links kind of fit together.
Oh yeah. Oh, did it that in oh, really I teach the rode teaching Pungju, Chagul Jayore, Melotayore, Salapayore, Sumgayora, Pavainenda. Salapay, they made not a tujar on Gurnet and Reina, and a Pumbu de Salpegdoa, Saul Pegre, actually Churgay Yore. Never not a tujar and Gurnet in a Salpegdoa. Oh, Tenia Kashe. Ci lama chachimuro ci sosu lama tindena ya meletrae te ore metra dagre kashe de metra madan sigre mangsha ke meletra ga mare tene chagul tre de kachigra chita mezu samlena tindoga kashe nga mel matra na se sosu sobuche de be swati yogi sare shenja chetaro shiso de pumbu de ngara Ralu shada chikwa chasar mato tilekege yomaro. Taina sosa shenjarab jig kashe melitra te yagumedu samsa tengeduwa. Tadi keba che yomara. Kashe tene sawal pena pusu tobura che. Ko te tike shenja chitandiro. Kasha chagul tana da kanga tumne tichana pitukcha do sam titangidwa, yawabedu samgidwa. Ina Professor Melta Gogisina, Melmata Rosi, Chagote Rosigre, Kasha. Karasin chimbal do yora. Soso shade ko chagul chi sagu yora. Chimbetran litaki yora. Cheda chagul tre de kashi yora. Ko chagul shade chimbatan resigora. Taina chidan migide. Tinde sambi mare de ina til mega chinge chi yo mare ta tangbu samlu te tere kashe te chagul te sho meta mata asigra o tinde tirwa tinde losu jo de ya kashe shinkom bu sonzare sar chi tinde se te saul peshane pe yora shin tinde ko mota mare shin yora meta ta yora ina oti chitanko chagul te chimba sonche sosu sobude chaguli chibatana ya ore sam tinde chene chimbetran ruara ya tichila ndiso.
So here, when it comes to dealing with death in Tibet, in particular, there are different ways in which bodies are disposed of. There is the sort of tradition of giving to the vultures. There are those that are cremated. There are those that are buried, and sometimes bodies are placed in water. However, when it comes to the kind of customs of dealing with those who have died, Tibetans tend to favor being given to the vultures, being chopped up and given to the vultures. Now, there are those cases where there are cremations done. For example, when it's a high lama, someone who's very precious and well regarded, they might be given a cremation. And when someone has died of like a contagious disease that could be dangerous, often they will be buried because of that kind of contagion. Now, there are those who, like, prior to their own death might think like, well, I don't want to be cremated. Well, like, I can't imagine my body being burned. And really, that's kind of a sign of excessive attachment to the aggregates of this life. When one's corpse is burned, it's not as though you are being burned. So this is kind of a sign of too much attachment to the aggregates of this life. Or maybe someone might think like, oh, I don't want to be buried. It would be so constrictive, like I'll be, you know, in the ground and something like that. But again, or someone might think like, I can't imagine being chopped up and offered to vultures. Well, again, when it comes to the corpse, it's not you anymore. However, the reason that many Tibetans favor the idea of a kind of sky burial or giving the body to the vultures is because one's body then becomes an act of generosity. So here, when it comes to and whether or not most Tibetans are actually sort of thinking of it in that way, this is something that is highly regarded because of the fact that there is that ability to be generous. So some people think that, oh, there wasn't enough wood in Tibet, they couldn't do cremations, or they liked to bury bodies or things like that. However, it's not the case that there wasn't enough wood. People can do that kind of cremation. There is enough wood for that. But the thing that people are attracted to is the idea of being generous with one's corpse.
Oh, yeah, this. You do.
Oh, yeah. Tinitire, Oteta Kebacha Medua, Yama Losolia, the Kebuta Tozuwe, Ya rode page, Telechala of Tinde Nyabdosha, Tindeche Yongdo, Pule, Gimatamut Redoa, Chala Keller of Tinde, Pumbu Nyabdosha, Yabuja Soul, Page, Kebuta Tozuya Kasha Shagdoa. She Lena some of the Kasha Yanti Metatana, Teller of the Chick Shire Tindo Losedoa, till Lumba Sosa Karine Ti Abudua, the sign the Mel Triety Abuduaco, Samara Chachi, Ati in Bache Keboch. That didn't have to demalo in that. Oh, that and that Tinde Ala Chuni Sunji thought the share, they share the Katam Pajules, long time, Katam Pajus in the church, but the other shop some shop Chiora. Oh, Tina. And the care. Chuni po de persona, Yala Chuni Tanda Remuti Shasha de Pedale, Tindre Retanda Shedua. Kanda Drawa Chaves is what Dravo de Sanjes and the Lameshan and the De Sonsa, and the Lamak and the De Songutose, Karakara Songutosena. Tene lole dege soche, tati loshana hamoga skemedwa. Mari kemo lomate stambo tome mari batsonje tela, mari batsonje tela, kemo lohachi tiyeche. Duchi tane tsangiban duchi gile sonje tela, tsakenge neche dramada soche. Namshi tiwu tabu dese, namshi ti tiwu tabu de, sumba namshi ti, namshi ti kasakal rotengeri chiwara temasu, tiwu pechani shedwa. Trabutes. Minda su ne truju das. Minda su de truju tambu trule at devadish. Churashi, temple memory samado. Kichi yuguru tomba dese. Tene mega kichi nave kichi tozu chabate roa. Kamba tomba chi che. Tanda namshi tatuzu soa ditu yonju ibe kichira. Ene regba ochi drawa des. Regba di trugu chunju chi liachi. Oche bakati kichi tende tete. Soa mela dagyabdesa. Sorati chonjetela. Ane mela dagyabshi rumushi orese. Seba de gyaba seba chonjetela me changtung gechi. Seba changtung drashi taas. Lemba se de kuba lemba de karase shingdo nyom drate se ro. Mechi shingdo tene ta. Togu yubache. Seba truman drasha, chuba seba de truma pame puji yubache. Kyawa tela pujindra, kyawa te tela pujeba. Pujeba se cheta puta pomuniga pusigra. Pupo pumo sigura. Tate sanku pui mende pupo lea sora chene. Pusi de pupora chikuda pomo sida. Inje pusi de nigal kora. Puda pomo sija. Pupo pumo sigra. Pujeba dandra asera. Kashi rugu drashra, kashi te roku atandra, shesum batar, hoti lotion dude. Yeah.
So, when it comes to the way that we deal with burying our dead in various cultures, we can see even in the past in Tibet, like for example, kings were buried with various of their possessions, and we see that in some other cultures as well, as if they were going to be able to somehow use those again or come back and get them or something like that. And we see that there are various traditions of burial or of cremation. Cremation is a very nice, clean way to deal with corpses and so forth. But there are various ways in which cultures deal with their dead, and we should respect that. Now here we will turn back to the teachings in the book, a quotation to support this from the Kadam Father teachings, and this is something that was between Atisha and Dromtenpa, which is really composed by Atisha. And so it says then, if I were to ask you to illustrate these 12 factors, what, O conqueror, would you say they are like? And this is really drawing from the Buddha's teachings, but in Atisha's words. The teacher Atisha taught Drom the following. This is taught in scripture, and really we have gone through this, so there isn't too much to add. Ignorance is like a blind old woman. Conditioning factors resemble a potter, while consciousness is like a monkey. When we think about our consciousness, our mind, how it kind of jumps all over the place, it's a bit like a monkey. A name and form is like getting into a boat. So here that is getting into a boat. When we think about getting into a boat on water, there's a little bit of like instability to that. While the 6 sense bases are like an empty region. Contact is said to be like a kiss, particularly like kissing a child or something, that making of contact. While feeling is like an arrow in the eye. Craving is said to be like drinking beer, while grasping is like reaching for fruit, when we're sort of reaching, wanting to get something. While becoming is said to be like a pregnant woman, while birth is like birthing that child, and aging and death is said to be like carrying a corpse. So here, just as a note, when it says while birth is like birthing that child, the word that is used here is pu, which often is referring, people think is referring only to males. But this is really a gender neutral kind of a term. It refers to both male and female children. So we shouldn't think that, although in these days, often when people see pu, they think it's automatically referring to a male. That isn't necessarily the case, and we don't have that problem here in the English.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh yeah, that di ma lotion. kowe kolo tese kora siba kolo sigra kowe kolo sinela siba kolo sinchibara te tane chida de tatelia chida shinji ji du sungo de ma sajemne sagi yebe piricha lagbe nyu sangere chiwara ti rumbu de kare chungo ora sena sigora chida shinji sungshe te sawe piriki kowe niju tamje leda nyumumbe shangwache ki midagba yinbese ku tenpochi yo mardo le nyumoge wange le sa ti wange kar yundo ine tendeke soso rawange yo marwa sa ko shangwache re midagba nyegi niju samma tamje jigbe rangshi chambare sawasde ko sen meba chaya yibeke kongone sangede ke yo marwa ina ko ten jigbe rangshi chemba chojele re sora te sawe piriki se kore niju tamje ne jigden koran sewara ne koran de metakba shegra marazu temburo shibi sorge yorte sayum kapchide ko jure yobete da hakodo chita ko tite koran zore lega che kare ne jurde yordo ti sayum kayatsu ko jurge yobeta arachira na ko ngazu temburo shibi tonge yorte tenchen rebara juwa sonza mangbochel teshen rego yora kowe neje jigden da chuji semje longcheba bodela kansado sigara tamje leda nyombe shawa chenge medaba imbese lenye jawanga ko juano kardo de tikeji rode yordo juwa mandro ge chi yo mare tangara je pa yabuji sebo tom mado juwa rakba to tongire mado chamu to tongi marwa samlo tane shingire mado keji jundo yore teto re lega cheni jundo yore nyomba shawachi ni medaba yimbe te tamje tar medaba yimbe yimba nije soam jigbe ranshila mande badsama nichu jinjida sama tamje ko kechi njone tamatala pa ne jigne meba chaya yimba de kanga te chuni rese te hakoya chedo ramuti tibre segara ya te chilama.
So then, just to read the next section, the Lord of Death, Yama, is grabbing the outside of the wheel of cyclic existence and devouring it. So although this is not like a literal kind of an interpretation, there is no actual Lord of Death sitting there eating this thing. This is to illustrate the lack of stability. So this drawing illustrates that all the habitats and inhabitants of cyclic existence are impermanent in the sense of being under the sway of karma and the afflictions. So here we have this sense of things as being so stable, so lasting, as though there were some kind of a permanence, when really it is the case that we are all under the sort of control of, or we are due to being within cyclic existence, we are subject to impermanence. We are under the control of karma and the afflictions, and therefore everything within this cycle of existence does not pass beyond the nature of perishing. All must be ultimately consumed by their impermanence. So here, again, we have this sense of things as being quite stable, but if we were to say be in an earthquake, we realize like things are constantly sort of moving. We aren't in that kind of solid environment that we feel. Everything is changing moment to moment, and it is only when we actually think about it that we can recognize that kind of impermanence of all phenomena. But normally we feel like ourself as well as our environment has this kind of stability, this kind of permanence. So really, what is being indicated by Yama, the Lord of Death, holding this whole wheel of cyclic existence and devouring it, is to indicate our impermanence, to indicate that we are all ultimately to be consumed by impermanence, and we are not beyond the kind of nature of perishing, of passing away.
Oh yeah. That tendo se ramutera. Te aya dire. Te tendo siba koloda yonso mande bata siba kolo chora. Te da be kaga chene. Ene sanjege ya dawara chiche dawadele chanzu tendo chadus tandus tendenge chora tira. Te tendo siba koloda yonso mande bata be kaga chene. Siba kolo ga che te losu chora. Mande ba tele passion, telebe ya kebato passion, kagachen sura. Passion, genes, kagachebader, chesed, kagachen setana. Gene, tamba sanje chomden de kusu, shine sanje ya sheng dengeche, cha jangde, nyangelen debo chunje, nyangde tarba chunje, nyange, koram ya nyumo, nyumo ba sebe wange, chagdang nyumo tangzi sebe wange, ane tarba tobi wardo, nyangelen deba nyumo pangba, ra, nyangelen deba de chunje dawa na shin pecha. 전에 긴고를 떠봐서 나왜 긴고도 도시야 찬주야 땡겐치 튀어라 대피리대 가르치 고고 열었으나 코알에 타버를 집에 탑 남제 temba서 코알에 타로 집에 탑 요래에서 람곰네 다음에 동반이다 메다바다 동해와라 소바 코알에 인종기 체도 메다바다 동해와고 대량해봐 조소나 제대소나 동해이라시 도나에 동반이 꼽네 야들레 타로 람제 템바 요래에서 교단께 마트베 ngobuche yo marwa 교진 가래네 교진데 매버 소샤나 공고부터 매버렌 조요라 교진 매네 ngo부터 중에 요 말에 교단께 요라고 어때인데 그 교대 사회 교대 매버 소샤 데부 매버레도 준이래 되어라 산테 타야 요래 텔레 교요래 테 ngo부레 교대 가나 에네테 용구리 교대 가래스 텐데 하나 준이고는 셰사라 어때인데다 다 매발에서 뭐 어디 tom에 마력 받은 매버서야 시거라 코알레 타발집에 탑 남지 템바데 쳐봐다 남게 뭐네 그래 남게 나와 되는 양대도 선배지라 뭐야 양에 맞지 두세 야 되시네 그래 뭐야 this one 어이구와 맞지 어딘데 사셔야 그저 다 된다 그랬어 전에 비리기스라 나와가르부터 비리기 코아 주다 제바 요소 세베 타르 요소 타르베 타르바 고베 템바데 첨바 이노선 다와데 고데 암냥데 어디 첨바 스티치로나 야
So
this one
I think we're just trying to let Geshe-la know that the time, we've actually reached the time. But here, elevated above and distinct from that wheel of life, without being mixed with it, the blessed Buddha, the teacher, is depicted, standing with his arm extended and pointing at the full moon, which symbolizes nirvana. So here, in this full illustration, you have Yama, the Lord of Death, holding this wheel of cyclic existence, and then the Buddha is standing separate, apart, distinct from that, elevated above and distinct from that wheel of life, symbolizing that he is no longer mixed with that kind of renewed rebirth due to karma and afflictions. And he is depicted then with his standing with his arm extended and pointing at the full moon, which is symbolizing nirvana, that kind of freedom from this cycle of existence. And this illustration, external to the central picture, symbolizes the truth of the path, the method of being liberated from cyclic existence, and the truth of the cessation that is complete liberation from cyclic existence and its causes, symbolized by a white moon in the sky. So here, based upon a recognition that everything is dependent upon causes and conditions, therefore, if there is a cause for our renewed rebirth within cyclic existence, by eliminating that cause through developing what we call the truth of the path and eliminating the causes that lead to renewed rebirth within cyclic existence, one can attain the truth of cessation, a cessation that is a complete liberation from cyclic existence and its causes. So here, the ability to attain liberation is based upon an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. First, that there is a true suffering, which is created, which is caused, and that there is a way to end that true suffering by cultivating true paths, which in turn leads to true cessation, a complete liberation from the causes of from cyclic existence and its causes. And so this, outside of the main depiction of the Wheel of Life, symbolizes the Buddha teaching the path to liberation from that kind of cycle of existence. So we will stop there for today. We went a little extra today, so we got something a little extra.
Thank you for walking us through the 12 links this morning, Ginla. And Katrina, thank you for your beautiful translations. For those who are watching online, we hope you'll join us again next Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We'll finish with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losam's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh yeah, tuchana geshala.